Hey everybody, welcome to Orcskull. These are prototypes of what the first edition of the zine is expected to look like. It'll have a color cover and then pages inside, folded and stapled. The paper is going to be this kind of archival looking paper. The paper itself is all going to be acid free. The rules themselves I'd like to get into here, but first I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I've been playing RPG games since the late 70s, but I really got into it in the 80s. I've been an artist my entire life, and I've been creating RPG games. I got into creating RPG games almost immediately when I started playing because I couldn't afford, my friends, none of us could afford the actual rules, so we made our own rules to play. And I've sort of always been making rules ever since then. I have a big stack of rules I've made, but I've never actually gotten to publishing them. So that's what this Kickstarter is about. That's what the zine is about. This zine is the first edition of the zine is going to be the Orcskull rules themselves, and then subsequent zines are going to be support material for that game. The idea is to start off simple and then increase in complexity as the zines progress. There will also be adventures, new monsters, new magic items, new rules, that sort of thing, as the zine supports the game itself. The additional rules will of course all be optional. The rules inside the game themselves are optional. I hope to include some optional rules right with the first edition of this. The purpose of these rules, I mean, why do we need another RPG game, right? Well, I play a little bit differently than most of the people I've run into playing RPG games, and so I wanted to express that in a rule set. I think that the way a person plays, their campaign world and everything, is very much expressed in the rules themselves. And so that's sort of the purpose of this game. The rules themselves are written in the language of Beowulf. So the enemies are called foemen, and I use that sort of language like liegemen, liege lord, which really gives a flavor to the game. Although the game can be used in any setting, you could certainly create your own setting using these rules. Absolutely. There is going to be a setting for this game produced in one of the zines if this is successful. Then I will go on to create a campaign world also that uses these. So the rules themselves are flavored in that campaign world a bit. And that's sort of out of necessity because I need a certain time frame. When exactly is this expected to be? And in that regard, the time for this would be sort of the Dark Ages after the fall or the leaving of a great empire. So you can very much think of it as sort of England, Dark Ages around the time of Beowulf. So that's the idea behind it. Although that's not the specific setting, that's sort of what it is. That's sort of what it's made after. The idea for myself is to keep games fairly simple. So I like games to be fairly simple. And the reason I like them to be fairly simple is I like to be able to create sort of on the fly so that the game itself is fast and very flexible. And that's the intent of these rules, is to make them that way. The intent is to leave them open so that make them in such a way that it's very easy to house rule and to create your own rules, add rules to it, take rules away. And that's really how I started playing this game, was by creating rules. And when I played D&D and other tabletop RPGs and with my friends, and my friends gamed, we very much enjoyed the complexity of games by adding and removing rules and playing with them like that. And that's the intent of Orcskull. And you're not expected, as the zines come out, it isn't expected you'll use all the rules. You'll get to pick and choose which rules, how you want to play the game. And that way the game can basically evolve into many different games, many different ways of playing. So I'll get into a little bit of just the basic idea behind the game itself. The game will be using 6-sided dice. The dice will explode on 6. That means if you roll your dice, and this would be a result of 5, let's say, but if you rolled a 6, then you'd have a 10, you'd get to roll the die again. If you rolled a 3, then you'd have a 13, because you get to roll any 6s again and then add the result to that. That way you can get quite a large variety of numbers, but there's also a curve, so it's not wildly unpredictable like it would be with a large die with lots of different values on it. That's the idea behind that. The character classes is going to allow you to play many different character classes, but the primary attributes are just basically fighters, mages, thieves, and clerics. You get a bonus for those, and those will apply to your different aspects of what you're trying to do. So, for example, cleric is good for getting blessings from temples, from a god if you worship a god. Thieving is basically skills. You can get all kinds of different skills. If you have a skill in something and you attempt to do it, then you need to roll an 8 or better on a die. But if you don't have a skill, then you need a 10 or better. And then that's the idea behind that. Magic is very much an open-ended system. And your bonus in magic goes into something called magic points. And your magic points are used to create your spells. Now, there are going to be spells that are already created, but it allows for players to create spells on the go as they're playing, as, you know, according to what they need. But there will be other kind of spells. They're called legendary spells that are pre-made, and once they're cast, they usually fade right away out of the book or off of a scroll. They usually disappear right away, and people don't know how to make those anymore, and that's sort of a flavor of the world itself. But that being said, people with innate magic abilities will be able to use their magic points to create spells. And the heroes are very simple. They're kept very simple, but there are backgrounds, and don't let the simplicity of it fool you into thinking that the heroes themselves won't be rich and complex. Their complexity and their richness happens through their evolution. Because even though you have a fighter, mage, thief, and cleric, if, for example, you want to be a thief character and you've got lots of different skills, you're not going to be able to wear armor to use those skills. Same with mage. If you want to cast magic spells and so forth, obviously you can't be wearing heavy armor and whatever. That's going to interfere with the magic. If you want to concentrate on being a fighter type, then you're going to have weapons and so forth in your hands, which again is going to make it difficult to cast spells. Now you can put all your equipment away and you can focus on magic and casting spells if you want. The game is designed to allow people to play however they want and be whatever they want. And sort of as time progresses, you create the character that you want to play. And you don't start out that way. So the other thing that this game uses is it uses hits, which as you start out with a number of hits. It's usually it's a 6-sided die plus whatever your fighter bonus is. So let's say your fighter bonus was a +2. You'd start off with a d6. Now, you can have the option of rolling or just taking 4 if you want. So in this case, I rolled, so I'll just stick with the roll that I rolled. I'd have 5 hits. So that's how many hits I would have. Hits are different than damage. Damage, you keep track of your damage. So as you take damage, oh, I took 2 points. Oh, I took 3 points. Oh, that's 5. So now you're wounded. So you don't actually subtract. You just keep track of your damage. And then when you heal, it reduces your damage. It's a little easier than erasing your hits all the time, trying to keep track. Your hits is a sort of a permanent number. You just keep track of how much damage you're taking. It takes away from the subtraction. So that's how the damage works in the combat. The other thing with combat is that combat really depends on the size of the creature you're fighting, your size, and the weapon size that you're using. So medium-sized creatures use 2 6-sided dice to attack. Again, they explode, so if you rolled boxcars, you get to roll the dice again. Oh, look at that. I got another one. So that's 12, 13, 19. So you've got 19, and I rolled a 6, so 23. So there you go. I rolled a 23. So you can get quite high numbers. You have a defense according to the armor that you're wearing. Whatever armor you're wearing, let's say in this case, I have a defense of 10, or my opponent has a defense of 10. So that would be, I rolled a 23, 13. So I'd need to add 13 to 10 to get 23. So 13 damage was done in that attack. Quite substantial, actually. All right. So when you take damage, it exceeds your hits. That's when you become wounded. And there's a wound table that you roll on to find out how badly your wound is and stuff. Magic works by spending magic points to create magic spells. And that'll be covered in the book so that you can cast any kind of magic spells. Again, there will be legendary spells. These are spells that are more powerful, but they're one use and they're handed out sort of as treasure as you explore and you adventure through the world. Monsters are intended to be very simple. Easy to create on the fly is the idea behind there. I will be including a random monster table with the game, but there will also be monsters created specifically for the game. The initial game, the initial rules will have your more generic kind of monsters, and then later editions will have more specific to a campaign world monsters, but it will include all kinds of monsters. The setting itself will be, like I say, set in a world with a very dramatic theme running throughout it that these rules will fit with very well, and that will have rules itself that will help expand on Orcskull. And if this is successful, then that will be in further editions of the zine. And this is it. This is the idea. I have a lot of it written out already, but it is not finished. And this Kickstarter, the reason behind it is to allow me, well, first is to give me a deadline. I have to get these rules out and I have to get them published. That's one of the big things, is a deadline. I need a deadline. It really helps me accomplish things. But the other thing, too, is I need to create all the artwork for it. That hasn't been done yet. I've created some artwork, but not all of it by any means. And I need to finish creating the rules as well. And I'm extremely excited about this. I think this game has a unique flavor to it. I've played a lot of games in my life, and I think this one's got a lot of unique things to offer. So yeah, that's it. Oh, and there is no AI. The art is not going to be AI in this at all. I will be hand drawing it all, and I intend to have it done by September, or in September of this year. So it's quite a pace I've set for myself, but I think I'm up to the challenge. I have done a lot of things in the past. I used to have a Patreon. I created maps for D&D and for Roll20 and for Fantasy Grounds for use in those. And so I've created a lot of maps over the years. In the introduction video, you saw that. And I've create a lot of art, and so that's what I want to do. I want to create this game, put the art in it, and then I look forward to making dungeons, monsters, everything else in future zines. So I hope you'll join me on this journey. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and I think it's worthwhile. Thank you for your time and your consideration.